Hey everyone, it's Noam. As many of you know, I host two podcasts here at Unpacked. In Unpacking Israeli History, we take a deep dive into Israel's rich and complex history. We show the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the inspirational, the difficult. That's what we do on Unpacking Israeli History. And on Wondering Jews, which I co-host with Michal Biton, we wonder about the big topics and ideas that people are thinking about today as it relates to Jewish thought, Jewish ideas, and the Jewish state. Today, we are releasing this episode to all of our listeners on Unpacking Israeli History and Wondering Jews because it's just so important. In this episode, I'm going to ask important questions about what just happened in Israel and Iran. And as the news is unfolding, literally as we speak, we're going to take a look back at the history to help us understand this complex and fascinating and scary time. We're going to ask what just happened in Iran. What did Israel's strike on Iran really mean? What does it mean? What message was sent and what comes next? To do that, I have Yaakov Katz here with me. Yaakov Katz is a longtime military reporter. He's a former Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief. He's also the author of Shadow Strike about Israel's 2007 bombing of Syria's nuclear reactor. And Yaakov has a tremendous amount to say on all of this, and I'm so grateful to have Yaakov on this podcast, on this show. Yaakov, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Noam.
This is such a consequential moment. You're in Israel right now, right?
I'm actually in Cyprus
You're in
because
Cyprus.
I was flying on my way back to Israel
Yeah.
on Thursday night from London, where I had been at a conference. I was supposed to land at 3:30 in the morning, and instead of landing in Ben Gurion, we landed in Cyprus alongside thousands and thousands of Israelis
Wow.
who are now stranded here because the airspace to Israel is currently closed.
Wow. Okay. So this is remarkable. This is really remarkable. Thank you for being here with us. You could not make it back to Israel. I want to go through what in the world just happened. So just briefly, could you tell me what just happened? Just what happened? Just lay it out objectively. What happened?
The facts are simple. Israel, after decades of warning that it would have to one day take military action against Iran's nuclear facilities, on Friday morning at about 3 o'clock, 3:30 a.m. Israel time, about 200 Air Force jets alongside Mossad agents and cells that were on the ground in Iran and potentially other special forces that we are yet to know about that were there, participated in a large-scale operation across Iran, literally across all parts of the country, neutralizing a number of key facilities that belong to, I would say, 3 departments within Iran's military nuclear infrastructure. Number one, nuclear installations. Primary among them, Natanz, a facility that we've heard lots about over the years. Natanz was first unveiled to the world by an Iranian resistance group back in, I think, 2002, 2003. It was deeply buried underground in the mountains of Iran. It was a place where they installed their most advanced centrifuges. Those are those steel machines that you spin uranium through to refine it to a high enough level to be able to use it for military purposes. They've installed thousands of different centrifuges there over the years. That was their main facility for enrichment of uranium. Parchin, another facility where close to Tehran, where Iran has allegedly over the years believed to be testing components of the weapons program and the weapons part of a nuclear bomb. That's part one. Part two is the, I would say, the missile capabilities. We've seen strikes also in different missile bases, Air Force bases, places where Iran is known to produce and to store its long-range ballistic missile. Going into this conflict, Iran was assumed to be in possession of several thousand long-range ballistic missiles, a much smaller number of launchers. So more missiles, smaller amount of launchers. Israel wanted to try and degrade and deny Iran the ability to retaliate and respond with those missiles. So that's where those attacks have been taking place. And the third category is the decapitation of Iran's top military command. So we saw the elimination of the Iranian Armed Forces Chief of Staff, the elimination of the Iranian IRGC commander, the Air Force commander, other top commanders, as well as top scientists who are involved in the weapons program. So 3 categories, lots of strikes, hours and hours. And as we're recording this, Noam, the attacks are continuing.
Wow. So thank you for laying it out very clearly what just happened. You recently wrote an article, actually yesterday, I think it was, that you wrote an article that laid out 3 reasons why now was the right moment to strike. And I want to ask you what those 3 reasons for this moment is, because I was in my memory right now, right before this happened, or as it was happening, and we started to hear that it might happen, I was remembering when I was in college in 2007, and I was writing a piece for Alan Dershowitz at the time, trying to make an argument for why preemptive strike against Iran would be necessary. And this was in 2007. This is a long time ago. We've been talking about this for a long time. There have been different moments. 2012 is another moment that people were talking about why it would have been a great moment to attack Iran and not allow them to have nuclear capabilities. Why now? You laid out 3 reasons. We've been talking about this for a while.
We've been talking about Iran for decades, right? Iran's pursuit of a nuclear capability is not new, right? It started even, I mean, just to give some historical context for a moment, under the Shah in the 1970s, he actually started a nuclear civilian program together with the United States, right? The US and the regime of the Shah were allies. Israel was allies with the Shah's regime. 1979, the Islamic Revolution, Khomeini takes over Iran, and things take a turn for the bad and then for the very bad. But the nuclear program also takes a turn, and intelligence starts to accumulate that the Iranians are not only doing this for energy, but are doing this for a nuclear weapons program. Now, I want to just add one other component to it because I think it's important, right? There are countries that have nuclear weapons. I mean, there are Islamic states that have nuclear weapons. Pakistan.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to go through the numbers here. India has 170 to 180. Pakistan has 170. North Korea has 50, I believe. The UK has 225. France has 290. China has between 500 and 600. Russia has over 5,500. The US has between 5,000 and 5,500. Now, Israel might or might not have nuclear warheads. Maybe not. What's it called?
We don't say we do. We don't say we don't.
What's the term? Is it amimut? Is that the term?
Policy of exactly. In Hebrew, it's amimut. It's ambiguity.
Yeah,
right?
Opaqueness. Exactly. Okay, so continue. Sorry.
But my point about like Pakistan, you could say, one second, is it just an Islamic state having weapons? Then Israel should have to bomb Pakistan. But no, that's not the issue. The issue is a state that is trying to get a nuclear weapon and openly calls for your annihilation and destruction. And that's the very toxic combination that we've seen in Iran. They openly call to destroy and wipe Israel off the map, and they are trying to pursue to get a capability that will allow them to essentially do that. So that's why Iran has always been this really great, massive potential threat to Israel. And that's why Israel for so long has done so much covert activity, sabotage, small assassinations of scientists and of other key officials over the years from 2007 and before and until today to try to delay and deny them of this capability.
Okay, so on that front, I want to actually go through the history for a minute here. I want to read some moments of Iranian history where they made comments about Israel. And let me go through this with you very quickly. 1980s to 1990s, Ayatollah Khomeini called Israel a cancerous tumor to be eradicated. Okay, then in 2005, Iran's president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, he infamously quoted Khomeini that Israel must be wiped off the map. In 2014,
Ahmadinejad, just by the way, with all the protests that have been going on in Colombia over the last couple of years, he was famously invited to give a lecture at Columbia, a guy who calls to destroy the Jewish state of Israel. Right?
Correct. And there was a debate about free speech at that point in time, and there were questions about the limits of it. Ahmadinejad also indulged in Holocaust denial. Important to remember that. In 2014, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he declared that the barbaric, wolf-like, and infanticidal regime of Israel has no cure but to be annihilated. Okay, in 2015, Khamenei doubled down, predicting on September 9th, 2015, that Israel will not exist in 25 years, etc., etc., etc. There are moments that you are pointing to. And in 2019, we have examples of shortly after being appointed the head of the IRGC, General Hussein Salami proclaimed that destroying Israel was an achievable goal. Now, this is going on.
Well, he's not alive anymore, Mr.
He's no longer
Salami,
alive. He's no longer amongst the living.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have all of these examples, and I skipped some, but I wanted to just make sure, as this is both a history podcast and it's a Jewish thought podcast as it relates to Wandering Jews and Unpacking Early History. It's a history podcast. We're combining them right now. I wanted to make sure that everyone listening understands exactly like Yaakov is saying, that there is a combination of, there are other countries that have nuclear abilities, but there aren't, as I think is what you're saying, countries that have nuclear abilities that are near Israel that are also saying they want to destroy Israel.
Exactly.
Correct?
Right. And
Okay.
that's this combination that Israel can't live with. So to go back to what you were asking about the three reasons why this was the right time to do it.
Yeah.
Number one was what we've heard over the last week or so from the IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog. Iran has been violating the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which they are a signatory to, which is supposed to put caps and limits on what they're allowed to do with their nuclear program. They have quadrupled the amount of uranium that's enriched to 60% level. Now, just also to explain to our listeners, for civilian energy purposes, you have no reason to have uranium that is enriched to over 4% of enrichment. They got to 20%, then they went up to 60%. You only would need that high level if you want to jump real quickly to 90%, which is military grade uranium, what you would need for a bomb. So they have always, if you look consistently over the last decade, let's say, they used to go to, they would stay at 4, they would move to 20. Then they started to make the move to 60. Then they started to move more to 60. And then they quadrupled the amount that they have at 60, enough already for 9 nuclear devices. And they would be able to refine it to 90% in the span of just a week with those centrifuges that we mentioned before, which hopefully have now been destroyed in Natanz. So we have the IAEA telling us they're violating, they're breaking all the rules, they're moving forward. Number one. Number two, if we look at Iran's strategy over the years and over the decades, it was a combination of how can we deter Israel from attacking us? And the way to do that is to, on the one hand, say to the Israelis, we will destroy you, like those quotes that you gave us, Noam. But we'll be able to do that with our own ballistic missiles and with the proxy armies that we have created, namely Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in the Gaza Strip, our ally Assad in Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. Those are basically going to surround Israel with a belt of fire. And Israel knows that if they were to try to attack us, they would be eliminated and bombarded in a way that they would never imagine. Well, let's look at what's happened since October 7th. October 7th was a disaster, no question. But the other side of October 7th has been the re-engineering of the Middle East. Assad gone, no longer in Syria. Israel, in the wake of his falling, destroyed all the strategic capabilities that were left in his arsenal: missiles, Air Force, Navy, and chemical weapons. Hezbollah, a shadow of what it used to be in the past. And Hamas, less than a shadow of what it used to be in the past. And Iran itself, let's not forget, Israel destroyed their S-300 Russian surface-to-air missile systems back in April and October of last year, when there was the last exchange of blows between our two countries. So if you're looking and you're thinking about what are the repercussions or the consequences, the retaliation of what we would face, well, it's a fraction of what it would have been on October 6th of 2023. This is a unique moment. And they're going to rebuild and they're going to rearm. So you want to do it in this window. And then there's number 3, Donald Trump. We have a new president in office now for about 5 months. Donald Trump sees Iran and the severity of the nuclear threat from Iran similar to Israel. Now, did he want to try to reach a deal? 100%. And did Israel give him the space and time? I think they did. Israel said, no problem, we'll hold off. Go do your talks. Send Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, to meet with the Iranian foreign minister in Oman and other places. They held 5 rounds of talks. and Iran insisted that it be able to retain independent enrichment, which Trump was convinced by Israel is a no. And he said they will not be allowed. This made it clear that Iran was not looking for a deal. It was looking to buy more time. And Israel was able to get Trump. I don't know if he gave a green light, but he didn't give a red light for Israel to take action.
Okay, fascinating. So I understand a little bit more about the history. I understand these three different reasons why now was the right moment to strike. I also want to go a little bit more into history if we can. Let's go to 1981 and 2007. Those are two other moments in which Israel took preemptive strikes against potential nuclear facilities. In 81, it was in Iraq. It was called Operation Opera. And in Syria, you wrote a book about it in 2007, which was led by Ehud Olmert. And I don't think that it was admitted by Israel until around 2018. Is that right? Something like that? I want to know, how is this similar to or different from those moments?
So it's a good question. It's similar in the, I would say, the big picture, because it is again an instance where Israel is making it very clear to the world and to its enemies that we will not allow a country that wants to destroy us to obtain nuclear weapons. And we will take unilateral military action in a preemptive way to deny that country of that capability, despite the risks, despite the gamble. That is something that Israel as a country stands by. This Begin Doctrine, named for Menachem Begin, who was the prime minister back in 1981, when he sent the Air Force to destroy Saddam Hussein's reactor, the Osirak reactor that was being built outside of Baghdad. So that, in that sense, the continuation and the reinforcement of the Begin Doctrine is very important for Israel as a pillar of its national security doctrine, and the Torah of which Israel lives according to when it comes to how it manages its security and defense, but also in sending that clear message to other enemies who might be contemplating getting their hands on nuclear weapons. So that's one. The other way I'd say it's similar to Syria, less similar to Iraq. In Iraq, the Reagan administration back in 81 did not want Israel to attack. And I'll remind our listeners that after Begin did attack against the explicit wishes of Ronald Reagan, President Reagan delayed the transfer and supply and delivery of fighter jets to Israel for a number of months. Not only that, but also allowed for an anti-Israel resolution to pass at the United Nations Security Council. So there was some tension. It did dissipate and pass over time. On the other hand, in 2007, what happened then was, without going too much into the detail, Israel learned of this nuclear reactor that the North Koreans were building for Assad in northeastern Syria, brought the intelligence to President George W. Bush, asked Bush to take action. Bush thought about it for a long time, said no in the end. And then when Ehud Olmert said to Bush, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it, this is where I think the similarity came into play.
Okay.
Bush did not say, go for it, you got it, we'll support you, whatever you need. Bush said, okay, I respect your decision. So he didn't give a green light, but he also didn't stop Israel. And there were people in his administration, namely Bob Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense, who went to Bush and said, Bush, you got to tell Olmert not to do it. And Bush said no. So he didn't give a green light. He didn't give a red light. I think here, Trump, we're seeing a similar scenario. Trump didn't want this. He would have preferred more time, maybe to reach a deal. Israel was somehow able to convince him. Now is the operational window. We need to act now. So he didn't say go for it, but he also didn't say stop. And let's be honest for a moment. I think people who have been following Donald Trump can assume that had Trump said to Netanyahu, don't do this. If you do it, we won't support you. We won't defend you. We won't give you weapons. We won't give you aid. You'll be all on your own. That would have been something that would have made Israel reconsider. So the fact that there wasn't a green light, there wasn't a red light, gives you the, I'll call it the gray light, which allows you to move in that gray zone and do what you got to get done.
There's a Talmudic concept called shtika kehoda'ah, that silence is equal to acquiescence, and saying it's okay. So maybe that's a little bit what's going on here. We don't know the extent to which the United States is involved, but like you're saying, that silence and that passivity around it kind of says something about the green light, which is not a formal green light, but might be a green light. So we don't know. I think right now we're in the moment. It's Friday, June 13th. It's Friday, June 13th when we are recording this. And so we're going to find out a lot more. But I want to know another thing, like you're providing us with a lot of history, with a lot of clarity and what's going on, why this moment, how it's similar or dissimilar to certain moments. There's another historical moment that's coming to mind right now, and I want to know to what extent you think that this relates. I'm thinking of 1967, actually, where the Egyptians had their air force wiped out preemptively by Israel. And it was this unbelievable moment that led to a fervor around this deep Jewish connection to Israel. I'm wondering if there's a similarity historically, that there's a precedent here in terms of positive fervor that emerged after this preemptive strike. Are you seeing in Israeli society right now, and granted you are in Cyprus as we speak, but I presume your family is in Israel? Is that right?
Yes.
I want to know, how is Israeli society feeling right now? Is there enthusiasm? Is there fear? Is there thank God we did this from right, center, left? Is this a politically divisive issue in Israel, or is this an issue that, broadly speaking, across right, center, and left, there's a broad agreement that this was an important thing to do?
All day I've been writing and doing interviews. I was on BBC and Sky News and other channels, and everybody asked me the same question. What about the critics of Netanyahu who say that he did this for politics?
I did not ask that.
I've given everyone the same answer.
Yeah.
It's absurd. This is a potential existential threat to the continued existence of the state of Israel, a country and a regime that has long called to destroy us, to kill my kids, to prevent a country and annihilate 10 million people, Israeli Jews, Israeli Arabs, to kill ultra-Orthodox and secular and modern Orthodox, and you name it, all together, and Cherkessan and Christian, and it doesn't make a difference who, and Muslims, of course. This is what they wanted to do. So the politics here, right, of what it was, I think is completely just, it's not part of what's happening. I think Israelis understand that. And Israelis stand today together because not only do they stand, and this is where I think we're getting to 1967, they stand in pride and in awe of what our military, our security agencies, the Mossad in particular, are capable of doing, the stories of what the Mossad has done in Iran, setting up bases, setting up drone manufacturing, being able to target from within Iran. Remarkable stuff, the stuff of Hollywood movies. And this amazing operation by the Air Force, if you look at some of the video footage that has come out, literally just putting a missile through a window onto the bed of the IRGC commander or into the bed of a nuclear scientist. This is literally while they were sleeping, right? Israel carried this out. This is really an unbelievable intelligence, quality, and penetration, but also amazing execution by the Israeli military. Now, I know that people say, well, how did they do this? And on October 7th, they failed miserably. Without getting into it, two very different things. But this gives you pride, can leave your jaw dropped, and make you feel that Zionist blood pumping through your veins and your heart, because this is what Israel is. So I think when we think back to 67, we think back to Entebbe, we think back to the bombing of Syria's nuclear reactor, we think back to Iraq, we think of these heroic operations, even recently in Gaza. Our known Zmora, the Yamam guy who goes in first at the top front of his force, gets killed trying to saving Noah Argamani. These are the modern heroes, and these pilots and these Mossad guys are the same. So I see that similarity there, but I'll tell you the other similarity that I see.
Okay.
The pre-67, right, May 67, before those 6 days in June of 67.
The Hamtana, the waiting period.
Israel was terrified and felt like we're going to be literally thrown into the sea. I don't think there's that feeling right now, but there's definitely a feeling of great trepidation and great concern of what's to come. Iran has abilities, has capabilities, has weapons, has missiles. We have some complicated days ahead of us. And Israelis will need to stand resilient and united to overcome the challenges that are still on the horizon.
You mentioned Zionism and like pumping through your blood. I was thinking a lot about that, and I'm going to make an episode all about how Zionism relates to this moment. But there's a quote that is sticking with me from Walter Russell Mead, who wrote The Ark of a Covenant, and he says that Zionism was not the triumphant battle cry of a victorious ethnic group, but a weird, crazy, desperate stab at survival. And the fact that 77 or so years after the creation of the state of Israel, that the Jewish state and the Jewish people still need to be desperately stabbing at survival is something that's both sad to me in many ways, but it's scary. It might be existential, might be something that will always be there. This always need to be desperately stabbing at survival. And I think what I'm hearing from you is across Israeli society, whether it's right, center, or left, doesn't matter. Everyone understands something that the world might not understand, which is that Jewish people are not going to rely on others in order to protect themselves and to survive. To be a Zionist means to say, I'm going to take matters into my own hands and protect myself and to have the dignity in doing so. That's what we just saw.
I totally agree with you. And I think that this is really one of those amazing moments of the Jewish people and of the state of Israel in the way that we stand together. And I'll just say also, Noam, this is it's going to be a tough moment, not just for the state of Israel. I think all Jews around the world need to be vigilant. I was talking with security officials earlier today. Iran has long arms and tentacles that go across the globe to different places, and people should be careful. So this is a moment that we all, I think, have to stand together. But I'll tell you, just jokingly, or anecdotally for a moment, Israel, Israelis well. There are dozens of Israeli airplanes that have been diverted to where I am right now in Cyprus. We're just a skip and a hop away from Israel, but we can't go there because of the closure of the skies. Israelis usually in a time like this, they would be yelling and screaming and shoving, and I saw Israelis at their best, understanding that we're all stuck in the middle of nowhere. Our families are across the Mediterranean in harm's way. And of course, we're all very concerned with what's going to happen, and we'd love to get home. But really exemplary behavior and conduct. And I was thinking about that watching thousands of Israelis who are here and seeing that this is because they understand this moment. They're willing to pay that price and make that sacrifice because they understand there is something so much bigger than all of us that is taking place right now. This is literally history. This is going to ensure the security. I literally believe this. This will ensure the security of my children, my grandchildren, please God, for decades to come. I don't yet have grandchildren, don't worry. But when I do one day, this will make them more secure. What happened in this last 24 hours, and it'll make me more secure, my kids, my grandchildren, and I think all Jews around the world will be more secure because of what Israel has done.
Well, I also heard that one of the arguments is that the world will be more secure as a result
100%.
of this. Beyond the Jewish world, that the world would be more secure. I have a question for you. I have two questions, one technical and one more broad-reaching. Technical. How did Israel get to Iran? For people who don't know, Iran's not next door to Israel. I always think of the meme like you don't even go here. Like you're not even next door neighbors of Israel. Why are you trying to destroy Israel? It's actually there are countries in between, including Iraq. Do we have any idea how Israel got there? That's my technical question.
By the way, you touch on a very important point, right? For years we're told, why does Hezbollah have issues with us? Because we have an unagreed upon border. Why is Hamas against us? Because we so-called are occupying, I say that with quotation marks, parts of their homeland, right? Whether it's Gaza or the West Bank. What beef do we have with the Iranians? We don't share a border. We don't have a land dispute. They're not Arabs, they're Persian. I mean, what is it all? And that's because this country has been hijacked, and we had good relations, like I said before, with the Shah. We flew there. Our Air Force is able to fly there because we have really some of the most advanced fighter jets that exist in the world. We have the F-35 with modifications. That's the Joint Strike Fighter, a fifth generation stealth-enabled fighter jet made by Lockheed Martin. That Israel was the first country in the world to get it after the United States and to use it in combat. The F-35 is able to it has Iran falls within its operational radius and combat radius. We also have F-15Is and F-16Is. One is the F-15I is called the Ram, Thunder. The F-16I is called the Sufa, which is Storm. The F-35I is called the Adir, right?
Strong, right?
The powerful, the strong of So we give our aircraft good names, but we also have mid-air refueling capabilities. So you're able to really create a capability of waves of aircraft that can take off and fly there and get mid-air refueling as needed. You fly north, you would go over Syria and then into Iraq and then to Iran. Another route is to potentially go Jordan, Iraq, and Iran. From what I hear, the route used this time was going to be Syria. You don't want to violate Jordanian airspace, and we need the Jordanians on our side, because as we've already seen since the attack, when the Iranians sent drones, the Jordanians reportedly have also downed some of those drones. So we don't want to upset the Jordanians by violating their airspace. By the way, 1981, Israel got to Iraq by flying over Jordan. The Jordanians were not happy. So today we do have peace with Jordan. So those are different routes that you would take there.
Okay, so here's my broad question. I remember this is different than the 7th of October because in many ways, it's the inverse of October 7th in the sense that Israel was at its most vulnerable and was attacked and didn't know what was going on. Now it's a moment in which Israel took preemptive action to, like you said, save your children and save your grandchildren. I remember in the days after the 7th of October, the Israeli thinker Micha Goodman had in a conversation in which he told everyone that Israel is going to have long days ahead. It's going to be long days ahead. And what Israel's going to need to do is it's going to need to be feared by its neighbors and not loved by the West. Israel wants both always, but it's more important to be feared by its neighbors than to be loved by the West. I want to know if you have any framing, any thoughts on the days ahead, on the weeks ahead, on the months ahead that we should be thinking about as it relates to the next moments, the future. What should we be thinking about, Yaakov, as we go forward in these reverse Hamtana days and not in these anticipatory days after the preemptive strike?
Look, a lot of it will depend on what happens. Obviously, what is left of Iran's ability to retaliate and what they're able to do. And out of those missiles that will likely fly towards Israel, how many penetrate Israel's multi-layered missile defense systems together with American support, and how many are intercepted. But I will say is that something to really think about here is how the 7th of October, I think, necessitates a much deeper change that Israel requires in the way it looks at its national security. If we think about, and you touched upon this, I'm going to tie into what you spoke about with the 6-Day War. If you think throughout Israeli history, in the 77 years, we have never really used preemptive military action except in two cases. One was nuclear, so Iraq, Syria, now with Iran, let's say. And the second one was during what we called the war between wars, the Mabam, which is the acronym, which was after the civil war broke out in Syria and Iran began to entrench itself in Syria. Israel saw an opportunity to take that out because it understood there was minimal risk of a retaliation from Syria. But we let Hezbollah grow and grow and grow. We let Hamas grow and grow and grow. We saw them training in Gaza. We did nothing. We saw Hezbollah massing 150,000 long-range rockets and missiles and short-range ones, and we did nothing to preempt that. The October 7th attack teaches us we cannot go back to that state of complacency. We cannot go back to the reality where we allow our enemies to build up. The one conventional exception of a conventional military threat is potentially the Six-Day War. Now, it's a historical argument because people will say, well, they were closing the Straits of Tehran and that was an act of war, and therefore Israel's attack against, as you mentioned, the air forces of Egypt and Syria were legitimate at the time because they had already been provoked. But even if you go either way, it was an understanding that you have to act before they act.
Mm-hmm.
I think that going forward, and this is part of this new change that we're seeing, is what we saw now in Iran, Israel will have to do this more often. We won't be able to kick the can down the road anymore. It's going to have to be a different Israel. It's going to have to be a different national security doctrine, one of much more preemption and less reactive. And that, when you think about it, on the one hand, it makes sense because you say, okay, I get it. Well, we can't let Hezbollah grow back to what it was. We can't let Hamas grow back to what it was, or Iran for that matter. But then if you think about the other side of it, it means that Israel will have to fight all the time. It will never end. It will be a constant mowing of the lawn, if I could use that metaphor, on all of its different fronts. And that's a little sad because Israelis don't want to fight. They want to just live peacefully. But we can't, and it ties into what Micha said. We need our enemies to fear us. Just because we want to live peacefully doesn't mean they want to live peacefully. And sadly, they don't want to. So it will require of us to do things that we would prefer not to have to do as a people. And that's a change. And it's a change that's going to, I think, have a deep impact on us as a people and on Israel as a country.
Yaakov, thank you so much for your thoughts, for your reflections, for your history. Yaakov, like I mentioned, he wrote such an unbelievable book on the story of 2007, on the 2007 bombing of Syria's nuclear reactor, Shadow Strike. And I encourage everyone to read that. We also are going to have an episode out about Shadow Strike, about 2007. That's going to be coming out as well. We're going to be speaking a lot about this. What we try to do, what I'm going to be trying to do here, is providing clarity to the chaos here in Israel, in the Israeli society, in the Jewish story right now. And people like Yaakov are helping us provide clarity during this chaos. Yaakov, please stay safe. Please send our love to your family. I guess a moment like this across the Jewish world, people are saying, Am Yisrael Chai.
Amen. Thank you, Noam.
Thank you. Unpacking Israeli History and Wandering Jews are productions of Unpacked, an Open Door Media brand. I'm Noam Weissman. The team producing this episode includes Jenny Falcon, Hart Levine, Rifki Stern, and Rob Pera. We did not have Michal Biton on this episode with us, but we had Yaakov Katz instead. To be continued, many more conversations. As always, email me at noam@unpack.media. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.